Everyone in the kingdom stepped away from the Alpha King, but one Omega was the only person who walked closer. The grand halls of the Northern Territories had always been filled with respect, but on this winter evening, there was something different in the air. The strongest leaders from every pack had gathered inside the royal palace, yet none of them dared to stand too close to Adrian Blackwood. The Alpha King carried a reputation that reached every corner of the kingdom. He was powerful, disciplined, and impossible to ignore. But there was something else people noticed. A distance around him that no one could cross. They admired his strength, but they feared the storm of emotions he carried behind his calm expression. Adrian had spent years protecting the Northern Territories, making difficult decisions and carrying responsibilities that few people understood. To the world, he was an unstoppable ruler. To himself, he was a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be understood. That was why everyone was surprised when Claire Morgan entered the royal hall. She was not a noble. She did not come from a powerful family. She was simply an Omega from a small mountain pack, who had been invited to assist during the winter gathering. Claire had no intention of attracting attention. She knew how people viewed Omegas in a world where status often decided respect. She had learned to stay quiet, help where she could, and never expect anyone to notice her. But when she crossed the center of the hall, she felt something unusual. The atmosphere around the Alpha King was different. Many people looked away when they passed him. Claire noticed something else. She noticed the tiredness behind his eyes. She noticed the loneliness hidden beneath his royal presence. For a moment she forgot about his title. She only saw someone who seemed to be carrying a burden alone. Adrian noticed her immediately. He was used to people changing their behavior around him. He was used to careful words and respectful distance. But Claire did not look at him with fear or ambition. She looked at him with understanding. That small difference caught his attention. "You are not afraid of me, Adrian," said quietly. Claire paused, realizing he was speaking to her. She looked around the room and noticed everyone watching. She could have stepped away like everyone else, but something inside her told her not to. "I do not think you are someone I should be afraid of," she answered. The hall became silent. No one spoke to the Alpha King that way. Not because they were forbidden, but because they believed he was impossible to reach. Adrian studied her carefully. For years people had seen his crown, his authority, and the power he represented. This Omega was the first person who seemed to notice the person beneath it all. Claire did not know that a simple moment of honesty would change the course of her life. She did not know that the Alpha King who everyone feared had just found the one person who could bring peace to the part of him no one else could reach. And Adrian did not know that the quiet Omega standing before him would become the first person in years to make him feel truly seen. Claire Morgan thought the moment inside the royal hall would be forgotten by the next morning, but the Alpha King remembered every word she had spoken. For years Adrian Blackwood had watched people carefully choose what to say around him. They praised his decisions, respected his authority, and followed his commands, but very few people ever looked beyond the crown. Claire had done something no one expected. She had looked at him as if he was simply a person. That single moment stayed in his mind long after the winter gathering ended. Meanwhile, Claire returned to her duties inside the palace, hoping everything would return to normal. She did not want attention. She did not want rumors. She only wanted to continue helping quietly and return to her small mountain pack when her work was finished. But the palace was different now. Servants whispered about the Omega who had spoken calmly to the Alpha King. Some were curious. Some were surprised. Claire tried not to listen, but she understood why people reacted that way. Adrian Blackwood was not someone people casually approached. He was the ruler of the Northern Territories, a leader whose decisions affected thousands of lives. Yet Claire could not forget what she saw when she looked at him. She did not see a frightening king. She saw someone who seemed exhausted from carrying everything alone. Later that week, Adrian requested a meeting with Claire in the palace gardens. The request surprised her. She wondered if she had accidentally crossed a line during the ceremony. When she arrived, she found him standing beside the frozen lake, watching the quiet landscape. "I wanted to thank you," Adrian said. Claire looked confused. "For what?" "For speaking to me like I was not a title." His answer caught her off guard. Claire had never considered that a simple conversation could mean so much. I only said what I believed, she replied. Adrian looked toward the snow-covered gardens. Most people see what they expect to see. They see the Alpha King. They see power. They do not see the person carrying it. Claire understood that feeling. She had spent years being seen only as an Omega. People noticed her position before they noticed her heart. Maybe that is why I understood, she said softly. Adrian looked at her with curiosity. Because you know what it feels like to be misunderstood? Claire nodded. Their conversation was simple, but for Adrian it was something rare. He did not feel like he had to perform the role of a perfect ruler. He could simply speak honestly. Over the following days, Adrian began noticing small things about Claire. She always thanked the palace workers. She remembered details about people's lives. She offered kindness without expecting anything in return. She was not trying to gain influence. She was simply living according to her own values. That was what made her different. One evening, Adrian walked through the palace halls and heard people discussing Claire. Some wondered why the Alpha King seemed interested in an Omega with no royal background. Others questioned what made her special. Adrian listened quietly, but he already knew the answer. Claire was not special because of a title or a hidden power. She was special because she remained kind in a world that often rewarded coldness. And while Claire still believed she was only a small part of a much larger kingdom, Adrian had started to realize something he could not ignore. The Omega everyone overlooked might be the one person who truly understood him. Claire Morgan had always believed that understanding someone did not mean knowing every detail about their life. Sometimes it only meant seeing the things others ignored. That was exactly what Adrian Blackwood had noticed about her. While the entire kingdom focused on his title, his authority, and the power of the Alpha King, Claire had noticed the quiet moments when he looked more like a tired man than a ruler. After their conversation in the palace gardens, Adrian found himself thinking about the Omega who had treated him differently from everyone else. He wanted to understand why she carried herself with such humility despite the way others often overlooked her. So he began learning more about her life, not through rumors or assumptions, but through the people who had actually known her. What he discovered surprised him. Claire had spent years helping others in her small mountain pack. She had cared for families during difficult seasons, supported younger members of the community, and offered kindness even when she received little recognition. She had never used her position as an Omega as an excuse to give up. Instead, she quietly created a place where others felt valued. Adrian realized that the quality he admired most about her was the same quality she never recognized in herself. Claire did not think she was strong. She believed strength belonged to people like Adrian. But Adrian was beginning to see strength differently. One afternoon, he found Claire in the palace library organizing old records. She looked surprised when he entered. "I did not expect to see you here," she said. Adrian smiled slightly. "I could say the same about you." Claire looked at the shelves around her. "There is so much history here. I wanted to learn more about the kingdom." Adrian noticed the curiosity in her voice. She was not searching for influence. She was searching for understanding. "Most people who come here want to know about power," he said. "You want to know about people." Claire smiled softly. "People are what make a kingdom worth protecting." Her answer stayed with him. That evening, Adrian returned to the private archives beneath the palace. For generations, the royal family had preserved records about rare connections between Alpha leaders and certain Omega bloodlines. He searched through the ancient writings, hoping to understand why Claire affected him in a way no one else ever had. The records spoke of balance. They described a bond where one person did not overpower the other, but where two individuals helped each other become stronger. Adrian closed the old book and thought about Claire. She did not calm him because she controlled him. She brought peace because she reminded him of the person he wanted to be. Meanwhile, Claire struggled with the growing attention surrounding her. She heard whispers that the Alpha King was interested in her, and she worried people would misunderstand. She did not want anyone to believe she was trying to gain a higher position. She had never wanted that. She only wanted to be accepted as herself. When Adrian found her later that evening, he immediately noticed her uncertainty. "You are worried about what people think," he said. Claire looked away. "I do not want them to believe I am important because of you." Adrian stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "Claire, your value existed before I ever noticed you." Those words reached deeper than he realized. For the first time, Claire began wondering if she had spent too long believing the opinions of others. And as the winter nights continued across the Northern Territories, the connection between the Alpha King and the Omega who saw beyond his crown grew stronger. Neither of them fully understood what was happening yet, but both knew one thing. Something about their meeting had changed the direction of their lives forever. The connection between Claire Morgan and Adrian Blackwood continued to grow quietly, but the rest of the Northern Territories was beginning to notice the change. The Alpha King who had once kept everyone at a careful distance was now spending time with an Omega who had no royal background and no desire for attention. Many people wondered why. Some believed there had to be a hidden reason behind Adrian's interest. Others simply could not understand how someone as ordinary as Claire could become important to the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. Claire heard the whispers, and they reminded her of everything she had spent years trying to avoid. She had always known that being different could attract judgment. She never wanted people to look at her because of her connection to the Alpha King. She wanted them to see the person she was before they knew his name beside hers. Adrian noticed her hesitation during a royal gathering. Unlike the others, he did not ignore the small changes in her expression. He had learned that Claire often stayed silent when something bothered her. "You are uncomfortable here," Adrian said softly. Claire looked surprised. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who pays attention." His answer made her smile slightly. Adrian understood that Claire was not afraid of the palace or the people inside it. She was afraid of losing the simple identity she had always known. Later that day, Adrian invited Claire to walk through the older sections of the kingdom outside the palace. He wanted her to see that her place was not decided by the opinions of others. As they traveled through the nearby villages, Claire noticed how different people reacted to Adrian. They respected him, but many still seemed nervous around him. She realized that being powerful did not always mean being understood. "Everyone sees what you can do," Claire said quietly. "But very few people ask how you feel." Adrian looked at her, surprised by the honesty of her words. "You notice things that others miss." Claire looked toward the snowy landscape. "Maybe because I know what it feels like when people only notice one part of you." That moment reminded Adrian why Claire was different. She did not see his position first. She saw his heart. When they returned to the palace, Adrian received a request from the royal council. They wanted to discuss the unusual connection between the Alpha King and the Omega from the mountain pack. The council members believed tradition should guide every decision involving the royal family. They questioned whether someone without a powerful lineage could truly stand beside the throne. Adrian listened patiently, but his response was calm and certain. "A person's worth is not created by their family name." The room became quiet. "It is revealed through their choices." Those words reflected everything he had learned from Claire. She had no need to prove herself through status. Her actions had already shown who she was. Meanwhile, Claire struggled with a question she had never expected to ask. Could she truly accept being seen? For so long, hiding had protected her from disappointment. But now she was beginning to understand that hiding also prevented people from knowing the truth about her. That evening, Adrian found Claire standing alone in the palace garden. The winter air was calm, and the lights of the kingdom shined in the distance. "You do not have to change who you are," Adrian told her. "The world needs people like you." Claire looked at him quietly. "Why do you believe in me so much?" Adrian paused before answering. "Because you believed in me when no one else tried." For the first time, Claire realized that the Alpha King was not the only person who had been searching for understanding. They had both spent years surrounded by people, yet both had felt alone. And as the first signs of change reached the Northern Territories, the bond between them became something neither of them could ignore. The connection between Claire Morgan and Adrian Blackwood had become impossible for the kingdom to ignore, but neither of them expected how quickly their lives would begin to change. For Claire, every day inside the royal palace felt like stepping into a world she had never imagined entering. She had spent years believing that someone like her would always remain unnoticed. Now people were watching her, asking questions about her, and wondering why the Alpha King treated her with such respect. But Adrian never allowed those opinions to decide Claire's place. He continued to remind her that she was not standing beside him because of rumors or expectations. She was there because he valued the person she was. One morning, Adrian brought Claire to the ancient archives beneath the palace. He wanted to show her something he had discovered while searching through the royal records. The room was filled with generations of history, carefully preserved by previous Alpha Kings. Claire looked around with curiosity, amazed by how much knowledge existed within those walls. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Adrian opened an old record and looked at the pages that described rare connections between Alpha leaders and certain Omega bloodlines. "Because I believe there is something you should know." Claire became quiet as she listened. The records described a bond unlike ordinary connections. It was not based on control or power. It was described as a balance between two individuals who could bring out the best in each other. Claire looked uncertain. "Are you saying this connection is the reason you feel different around me?" Adrian considered her question carefully. "I think it is part of the reason. But it is not the only reason." His answer surprised her. She expected him to talk about destiny. Instead, he spoke about her choices, her kindness, and the way she treated people when no one was watching. "A bond may bring two people together," Adrian said, "but it does not create the respect between them. That comes from who they are." Claire felt those words deeply. She had always worried that people would only value her because of her connection to the Alpha King. She never wanted to be important because of something she could not control. Adrian understood that fear. Meanwhile, members of the royal council continued observing the changes within the palace. They noticed that Adrian was becoming more open and patient. They noticed that the people of the kingdom responded positively to Claire's presence. But some still questioned whether an Omega without a royal background could truly have a place near the throne. When Adrian heard these concerns, he did not respond with anger. Instead, he asked them to look at Claire's actions. If someone spends their life helping others, listening to those who are ignored, and bringing peace wherever they go, why should their birth decide their worth? The question remained in the minds of everyone who heard it. Later that evening, Claire walked through the palace garden with Adrian. The winter sky stretched above them, filled with quiet stars. "I still worry that people will think I changed because of you," Claire admitted. Adrian looked at her calmly. "You have not changed because of me. You have simply stopped hiding the person you already were." Claire looked away, feeling the truth of his words. For so long, she believed she needed permission to be valued. Now she was beginning to understand that her worth had always existed. She had only been waiting for someone to see it. As the bond between the Alpha King and the Omega continued to grow, the kingdom slowly began to understand something important. Claire was not powerful because she stood beside Adrian. Adrian was stronger because he had found someone who reminded him what true strength meant. And beneath the quiet winter sky, two people who had once felt alone began discovering that they were never meant to face the world by themselves. Claire Morgan had spent most of her life believing that being unseen was the safest way to live, but now she was learning that hiding had also prevented her from discovering her own strength. The days after the ancient records were revealed brought new challenges. The kingdom was slowly accepting the connection between the Omega and the Alpha King, but Claire still struggled with the attention that came with it. She was not afraid of Adrian Blackwood. She was not afraid of the palace. What frightened her was the idea that people might only see her because of him. Adrian noticed her uncertainty and understood why she felt that way. He had spent years being seen only as the Alpha King. People respected his position, but they rarely asked about the person behind the crown. In many ways, they shared the same experience. Both of them knew what it felt like to be reduced to a single part of who they were. One afternoon, Adrian invited Claire to join him during a visit to the northern villages. He wanted her to see the people beyond the palace walls and understand the responsibilities they carried together. Claire was surprised by the invitation. She expected to remain in the background, but Adrian encouraged her to share her thoughts. As they walked through the villages, Claire noticed the small details that others often missed. She noticed the elderly residents who needed assistance. She noticed the families who needed encouragement during the long winter season. She noticed the workers who quietly kept the community running. Adrian watched as people naturally trusted her. They did not care about her connection to the throne. They cared because Claire listened. You have a way of making people feel important, Adrian said as they walked through the snowy paths. Claire smiled gently. Everyone deserves to feel important. Adrian looked at her and realized that this simple belief was something rare. Many people wanted power because they wanted to be noticed. Claire had influence because she wanted others to be noticed. Later that evening, the royal council gathered to discuss the future of the kingdom. Some members believed traditions should remain unchanged. They believed leadership should follow old expectations. But Adrian had changed. He no longer measured strength by control. He measured it by understanding. A ruler who only listens to those with power will never truly understand the people they lead, Adrian said. A kingdom grows when every voice matters. His words reflected what Claire had shown him. She had never demanded a place beside him. She had earned trust through compassion. Meanwhile, Claire began facing her own fears. She realized she could no longer pretend she was the same person who entered the palace months before. She had changed, but not because she had gained a connection to the Alpha King. She had changed because someone finally encouraged her to believe in herself. One evening, Claire stood with Adrian in the palace garden. The winter air was peaceful, and the lights of the kingdom shined below them. I still wonder why you believe I am capable of so much, she admitted. Adrian looked at her with quiet confidence. Because I have seen what happens when someone with a kind heart stops hiding. Claire looked away, feeling the weight of those words. For years, she believed her gentleness made her weak. Now she understood that kindness could be a different form of strength. Adrian had not found someone who could simply calm his inner struggles. He had found someone who reminded him what kind of leader he wanted to become. And Claire had not found someone who saved her from being forgotten. She had found someone who helped her realize she was never meant to disappear. As the bond between them continued to grow, the Northern Territories slowly began to see a new future forming. A future where power and compassion could stand together, and where the Omega who once doubted herself became the person who inspired an entire kingdom. The Northern Territories began to experience a quiet transformation, and everyone could feel that something had changed. It was not because of a new law or a powerful announcement. It was because the people had started seeing their kingdom differently. At the center of that change was Claire Morgan, the Omega who once believed her only purpose was to stay unnoticed. Now she walked through the palace halls with a confidence she never thought she would have. She was still gentle. She was still humble. But she no longer believed those qualities made her less important. Adrian Blackwood noticed the difference immediately. He had always admired Claire's kindness, but now he saw something more. He saw someone who had found the courage to stand beside him without losing herself. That was what made their connection different. Claire did not become stronger by becoming like the Alpha King. She became stronger by accepting who she already was. One morning, Adrian invited Claire to attend a meeting with representatives from different packs across the Northern Territories. It was the first time many leaders had the opportunity to hear her thoughts directly. Some were curious. Some were uncertain. They were used to seeing power displayed through authority and tradition. They were not used to someone changing minds through patience and understanding. During the meeting, one of the leaders asked Claire what she believed was the most important quality in a ruler. She expected the question to challenge her, but she answered honestly. A ruler should remember that every person in the kingdom has a story worth hearing. The room became quiet. Adrian watched the reaction of the leaders around him. He knew Claire's words were simple, but their meaning was powerful. She was not speaking as someone seeking influence. She was speaking as someone who had spent her life noticing the people others overlooked. After the meeting, Adrian walked with Claire through the palace gardens. You realize you changed the entire conversation today, he said. Claire looked surprised. I only answered a question. Adrian smiled. That is exactly why it mattered. Claire had never tried to impress anyone. She had never prepared speeches or searched for the perfect words. She simply spoke from her heart. Meanwhile, Adrian began to understand something about leadership that he had forgotten. For years he believed being a strong Alpha King meant carrying every responsibility alone. He believed showing uncertainty would make him appear weak. But Claire showed him that trust was not created by pretending to have no struggles. Trust was created by being honest and allowing others to stand beside you. That evening, Adrian and Claire watched the sunset from the highest balcony of the palace. The kingdom below was peaceful, and for once, Adrian did not feel like he was carrying the weight of the entire world by himself. "Before you came here, I thought strength meant never needing anyone," Adrian admitted. Claire looked at him quietly. "And now?" He looked toward the lights of the kingdom. "Now I think strength means knowing who you can trust." Claire smiled softly. She realized that Adrian had changed too. He was still the Alpha King. He was still powerful and respected. But now people could see the compassion behind his leadership. Their bond was no longer something the kingdom questioned. It had become something people admired. Not because an Omega had changed an Alpha King, and not because an Alpha King had chosen an Omega. It was because two people who had spent their lives feeling alone had finally found someone who understood them. And as the Northern Territories entered a new era, Claire and Adrian became a reminder that the greatest connections are not built on power. They are built on the courage to truly see another person. The Northern Territories continued to change as the bond between Claire Morgan and Adrian Blackwood became a symbol of something greater than either of them expected. The kingdom had once been defined by traditions that separated people by rank, position, and reputation. But now many began to question those old beliefs. They saw an Omega who was never meant to be overlooked, and an Alpha King who had discovered that true leadership was not about standing above others. It was about standing with them. Claire noticed the changes slowly. People who once avoided conversations with her now approached her with respect. They no longer saw her only as the Omega connected to the throne. They saw her as Claire, the person who listened, cared, and reminded them that every voice mattered. Still, she sometimes wondered if she truly belonged in a world so different from the one she had known. Adrian always noticed those moments of doubt. He understood because he had lived with his own doubts for years. The difference was that he had hidden his behind a crown, while Claire had hidden hers behind silence. One afternoon, Adrian invited Claire to visit the royal gardens where the first snow had begun to melt. The winter season was slowly ending, and the landscape was changing. Small signs of new life appeared beneath the fading cold. "It reminds me of you," Adrian said. Claire looked at him curiously. "How so?" Everyone thought winter was all there was. They never looked closely enough to see what was waiting underneath. Claire smiled at his words. She had spent so much time believing that the quiet parts of herself were weaknesses. Now she understood that patience, compassion, and understanding could create change in ways power never could. Later that week, the kingdom held a gathering where leaders from different territories came together to discuss the future. This time, Claire stood beside Adrian not as someone being introduced, but as someone whose opinion was valued. The leaders asked about the improvements they had noticed throughout the kingdom. Many of them recognized that the changes were not created through force or authority. They were created through listening. Claire shared her thoughts about creating stronger connections between communities. She spoke about the importance of supporting those who were often ignored, and making sure that no one felt invisible. Adrian watched the room as people listened to her. He remembered the first night they met, when she believed she was someone the world would never notice. Now her voice reached people who had once never taken the time to hear her. After the gathering, Adrian and Claire walked through the palace halls together. "Do you remember when you wanted to disappear?" Adrian asked. Claire laughed softly. "I remember thinking that would be easier." Adrian looked at her with a gentle expression. "And now?" Claire looked around the palace, then toward the people moving through the halls. "Now I think being seen is not something to fear when the right people are looking." Her answer stayed with him. Adrian had spent years believing his role required him to be distant and unshakable. But Claire showed him that connection did not weaken a leader. It made a leader stronger. The kingdom had changed because two people had chosen to understand each other. The Omega who once hid from attention became a source of hope. The Alpha King who once carried everything alone learned that sharing a burden did not make him less powerful. And as the seasons changed across the Northern Territories, everyone began to understand the truth that Claire and Adrian had discovered together. The greatest strength was never found in power alone. It was found in the courage to care, the patience to listen, and the willingness to let someone truly know you. The Northern Territories had become a place where old traditions and new understanding existed together, and at the center of that change stood Claire Morgan and Adrian Blackwood. Years before, Claire had entered the royal palace believing she was someone who should remain unnoticed. She had walked through the halls quietly, careful not to draw attention, because she believed being seen would only bring judgment. Adrian had carried a different kind of loneliness. As the Alpha King, he was surrounded by people every day, yet very few ever saw the person beyond the crown. Neither of them expected that one simple meeting would change the way they viewed themselves and the world around them. Now, as the seasons changed, Claire looked back on the journey that brought her here. She no longer wondered if she belonged. She no longer questioned whether her voice mattered. She had learned that being gentle did not mean being weak, and being different did not mean being less. Adrian had learned something equally important. A true leader did not have to carry every burden alone. Strength was not measured by how much one person could endure. It was measured by the willingness to trust others and create a place where everyone could grow. The kingdom celebrated a new era during the spring gathering, where leaders from every territory came together. This time, Claire stood beside Adrian with confidence. She was not there because of a title or because of a connection people wanted to understand. She was there because the people had witnessed her heart. They had seen how she brought comfort to those who felt forgotten, and how she encouraged others to believe in their own value. Adrian looked across the gathering and saw the same Omega who had once spoken to him without fear. The difference was that now the entire kingdom could see what he had seen from the beginning. Claire was not powerful because of destiny. Destiny had recognized her because of the strength she already carried inside. After the celebration ended, Claire and Adrian returned to the quiet palace gardens where their story had begun. The flowers that had once rested beneath winter snow were now blooming again. Claire smiled as she looked at the peaceful landscape. "Everything feels different now," she said. Adrian stood beside her. "The kingdom changed because you reminded people what they had forgotten." Claire shook her head gently. "It changed because people chose to listen." Adrian smiled because that answer was exactly who she was. She never wanted credit. She only wanted people to understand each other. Together, they watched the lights of the Northern Territories shine in the distance. Adrian no longer felt like a king standing alone above everyone else. He felt like a leader walking beside the people he protected. Claire no longer felt like an Omega waiting for acceptance. She felt like a woman who had finally accepted herself. Their bond was never about one person saving another. It was about two people helping each other discover what they had always carried within. The Alpha King who everyone once feared found peace through understanding. The Omega who once hid from the world found courage through being seen. And as the story of Claire and Adrian continued through generations, the kingdom remembered one truth above all others. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never struggle. They are the ones that remain kind, even after they have known what it feels like to be unseen.